The Galactic Council trembled in fear after humans achieved the impossible, becoming immune to death itself. The humans had to survive and exploit this new power, or their entire race would be exterminated. Captain James Maxwell rallied his squad of human soldiers. They were fighting alongside the Zorgons. The Zorgons had advanced tech, but poor combat skills. The mission was urgent. Hostile Krelath forces threatened a key planet. Krelath weapons fire rained down. Several humans were hit. They fell still and bleeding. A strange energy pulse suddenly swept the battlefield. It came from a secret Krelath weapon. James braced for searing pain, but felt nothing. To his shock, his fallen soldiers began to stir and rise. Their devastating wounds healed before his eyes. The Zorgons stared in utter disbelief. Somehow the humans were immune to the Krelath death pulse. James seized the moment. He ordered his resurrected troops to press the attack. They drove back the horrified Krelath. As the dust settled, James knew everything had changed. The key to humanity's survival, or its ultimate doom, had just been unleashed. The footage from James Maxwell's helmet camera spread through the extranet like a virus. Within hours, every sapient being in the galaxy had seen the human soldiers rise from the dead. The Krelath weapons, designed to permanently extinguish life, had failed against them. It was a development that sent shockwaves through the fragile political landscape of the Galactic Council. "This session of the Galactic Council is now in order," announced the Ethian moderator, his voice amplified by the hover dais he stood upon. "The sole matter to be discussed is the humans' apparent immunity to death, as witnessed in the Battle of Zorin Prime." The council chamber erupted into a cacophony of arguing voices, each representative shouting to be heard over the others. James watched the pandemonium unfold from his seat in the observers section, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. "The humans have become an existential threat," exclaimed the Naxian delegate, his green skin flushed with anger. "They could conquer us all and establish themselves as the dominant power in the galaxy." "I concur," added the insectoid Vespid representative. "The balance of power has been upended. We cannot allow a single species to hold such an advantage over the rest of us." Ambassador Xyloth, the towering Zorgon seated across the room, stood up and raised his hands in a gesture of calm. "Please, let us not be hasty," he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "The humans have been our steadfast allies for centuries. They fought and died alongside us against the Krelath. We should approach this matter with reason and diplomacy, not fear and aggression." The Naxian representative sneered. "You only defend them because your people were there to witness their resurrection. How do we know you haven't already struck a deal with them behind our backs?" Xyloth's eyes narrowed. "I resent your accusation. The Zorgons have always been transparent in our dealings with the Council." The moderator slammed his appendage against the dais, silencing the chamber. "Order! We will have order in this council." He turned to face the human delegation. "Ambassador Maxwell, what say you on this matter?" James stood up, feeling the weight of 100 alien eyes upon him. "The human race has always been committed to peace and cooperation," he said, his voice steady. "We have no desire to use our newfound ability for conquest or domination. We are just as surprised by this development as all of you, and we are willing to work with the Council to understand its implications." The Vespid representative chittered in agitation. "Words are cheap, Ambassador. The Council demands action. We require extensive testing and monitoring of your people to ensure that you do not pose a threat to galactic stability." James frowned. "Testing? You mean experimenting on us like lab animals?" "If you have nothing to hide, then you should have no objection," the Naxian delegate said, a smug smile on his face. Ambassador Xyloth stood up again. "This is an outrage. The humans are not subjects to be poked and prodded at the Council's whim. Any study of their condition must be conducted with their full consent and cooperation." The moderator raised his appendages, calling for silence. "It seems we have reached an impasse. We shall put the matter to a vote. All in favor of demanding compulsory testing and monitoring of the human race. with the threat of sanctions and military action should they refuse. Say aye." A chorus of ayes filled the chamber, drowning out the few dissenting voices. James felt a sinking feeling in his stomach as he realized the magnitude of what had just happened. "The ayes have it," the moderator said, slamming his appendage against the dais. "Ambassador Maxwell, you are hereby summoned to return to Earth and inform your leadership of the Council's decision. We expect your full compliance within one standard galactic week." James nodded, his jaw clenched tight. "I will relay your message, but know this. The human race will not be bullied or coerced. We will fight to defend our sovereignty and our right to self-determination." With that, he turned and strode out of the council chamber, his mind racing with the implications of what had just transpired. The fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, now hung in the balance. James stepped into the Situation Room, his heart pounding in his chest. President Amanda Novak sat at the head of the table, her eyes fixed on the wall of screens displaying the latest news feeds. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the nation's highest-ranking military officers, were seated around her, their faces grim. "Captain Maxwell," the President said, gesturing for him to take a seat, "thank you for coming on such short notice. I take it the Galactic Council didn't react well to the news of our development." James nodded. "That's an understatement, Madam President. They're demanding full access to our people for testing and monitoring. They think we're a threat to the balance of power." General Ramirez, the Chief of Staff of the Army, slammed his fist on the table. "This is an outrage. We can't let a bunch of alien bureaucrats dictate terms to us. We should keep our immunity under wraps and prepare for the worst." Admiral Singh, the Chief of Naval Operations, nodded in agreement. "I concur. We have no idea what kind of tests they want to run on our people. For all we know, they could be looking for ways to neutralize our advantage." President Novak held up a hand, silencing the room. "I understand your concerns, gentlemen, but we can't afford to isolate ourselves from the galactic community. If we're seen as uncooperative or hostile, it could lead to sanctions, or worse, an interstellar war." James leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Madam President, if I may?" Novak nodded. "Go ahead, Captain." "I think there's a way to find a middle ground here. We agree to limited testing and information sharing, but only under certain conditions. First, we want a non-aggression pact from the Galactic Council. They don't come after us. We don't go after them." The President raised an eyebrow. "And second?" "We establish a joint research initiative," James said. "Human and alien scientists working together to study this phenomenon. That way, everyone has a stake in the outcome." General Ramirez frowned. "You really think they'll go for that? They seemed pretty adamant about having control over the process." James shrugged. "It's worth a shot. If we come to the table with a reasonable proposal, it shows we're willing to play ball, and if they reject it, we'll know where we stand." President Novak tapped her fingers on the table, considering the options. "All right," she said finally. "Captain Maxwell, you have my authorization to present this compromise to the Galactic Council, but make it clear that we will not tolerate any attempts to infringe upon our sovereignty or the rights of our citizens." James stood up, his chest swelling with pride. "Yes, ma'am, I'll make sure they understand our position." As he turned to leave, Admiral Singh called out after him, "Captain, good luck out there. We're all counting on you." James nodded, his jaw set with determination. He knew the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey back to the Galactic Council was a blur. James spent every waking moment rehearsing his speech, going over every possible objection and counter-argument. By the time he arrived at the council chamber, he was exhausted but focused. The council members were already seated when he entered, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. James took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice steady, "I come before you today with a proposal from the human race. We understand your concerns about our newfound abilities, and we are willing to work with you to address them." He outlined the terms of the compromise, emphasizing the non-aggression pact and joint research initiative. The council members listened intently, some nodding in approval, others frowning in skepticism. When he finished, the chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, the Ethian moderator spoke. "Ambassador Maxwell, your proposal is intriguing. The council will need time to deliberate and vote on the matter." James nodded. "Of course, the human race eagerly awaits your decision." The deliberations stretched on for hours, with James pacing outside the council chamber. When the doors finally opened, he was ushered back inside to hear the verdict. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision," the moderator announced. "We agree to the terms of the human proposal, with some minor amendments. The testing will proceed under the supervision of a joint human-alien task force, and the non-aggression pact will be ratified by all member species." James let out a sigh of relief, his shoulders sagging. "Thank you, councillors. The human race appreciates your willingness to work towards a peaceful resolution." As the council members filed out of the chamber, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The testing would be rigorous and invasive, and tensions between the humans and aliens were still running high. But for now, at least, they had bought themselves some time. The Joint Research Initiative was in full swing, and James found himself spending long hours in the lab with Ambassador Xyloth and a team of brilliant scientists from across the galaxy. They pored over data from the Battle of Zorin Prime, analyzing the energy readings from the Krelath weapon, and studying samples of human tissue that had been exposed to the pulse. "Look at this," Dr. Sarin, a human geneticist, said as she pointed to a holographic display. "The energy pulse seems to have triggered a previously dormant gene in the human genome. It's like a switch was flipped, activating a latent ability to regenerate and heal from even the most severe injuries." Ambassador Xyloth leaned in closer, his eyes widening. "Fascinating, and you say this gene exists in all humans?" Dr. Sarin nodded. "It appears so, but it remains inactive until exposed to the specific energy signature of the Krelath weapon." James felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as he listened to the scientists' findings. On one hand, this discovery could be a game-changer for humanity, offering them a level of resilience and survivability that was unheard of. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that this knowledge could be dangerous in the wrong hands. As the team continued their research, they made another startling discovery. It seems that the gene can also be activated through targeted gene therapy, Dr. Zorn, a Zorgon biologist, said. "In theory, we could give any human the same regenerative abilities without the need for exposure to the energy pulse." James felt a chill run down his spine. If this information got out, it could lead to a new arms race with every species in the galaxy vying for control over the technology. He knew he had to act fast to prevent that from happening. "Ambassador Xyloth, can I speak with you privately?" James asked, pulling the Zorgon aside. Xyloth nodded, and they stepped into a small conference room adjacent to the lab. "What's on your mind, Captain?" James took a deep breath. "I'm concerned about the implications of this research. If the Krelath find out about the gene therapy, they could try to recreate the weapon and use it against other races. We can't let that happen." Xyloth frowned. "I agree, but what can we do? The Krelath are notoriously secretive about their military research." James hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "I have an idea, but it's risky. We need to infiltrate a Krelath research facility and destroy any remaining samples of the weapon, along with any data they may have collected on the energy pulse." Xyloth's eyes widened. "That's a tall order, Captain. The Krelath are not known for their hospitality towards uninvited guests." James nodded. "I know, but we have to try. If we don't, the consequences could be catastrophic." Xyloth was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right. We can't let this technology fall into the wrong hands. I'll bring your proposal to the Galactic Council. With any luck, they'll see the wisdom in it." James felt a surge of gratitude towards the Zorgon ambassador. "Thank you, Xyloth. I know this isn't an easy decision." Xyloth placed a hand on James's shoulder. Nothing worth doing ever is, my friend. But if anyone can pull this off, it's you. The next few days were a blur of activity as James and Xyloth worked to convince the Galactic Council of the need for action. There was resistance at first, with some members expressing doubts about the feasibility and legality of the proposed mission. But in the end, the threat of the Kralath weapon was too great to ignore. "The Council has made its decision," the Ethian moderator announced. "Captain Maxwell will lead a team of elite human and alien operatives to infiltrate the Kralath research facility and destroy any remaining samples of the weapon. The mission is classified as top secret, and all members of the team will be granted full diplomatic immunity for the duration of the operation." James felt a weight settle on his shoulders as he heard the Council's verdict. He knew the mission would be dangerous, perhaps even suicidal, but he also knew that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. As he stepped out of the council chamber, Ambassador Xyloth was waiting for him. "I have something for you," the Zorgon said, handing James a small device. "It's a quantum entanglement communicator. It will allow us to stay in touch no matter where you are in the galaxy." James took the device, feeling a lump form in his throat. "Thank you, my friend. I couldn't have done this without you." Xyloth smiled. "We're in this together, James. Always remember that." With those words ringing in his ears, James set off to assemble his team and prepare for the mission ahead. He knew the odds were stacked against them, but he also knew that failure was not an option. The future of the galaxy depended on their success. The Kralath research facility loomed before James and his team, a monolithic structure of black metal and pulsing red lights. They had managed to slip past the outer defenses, thanks to the intel provided by Ambassador Xyloth's contacts, but the real challenge still lay ahead. "All right, listen up," James said, his voice low and urgent. "We stick to the plan. Jameson and Kara, you take the West Wing. Xyloth and I will head for the Central Lab. We find the weapon, we destroy it, and we get the hell out of here. Got it?" The team nodded, their faces grim with determination. They knew the stakes, and they were ready to do whatever it took to stop the Kralath. As they made their way into the facility, the first wave of Kralath soldiers appeared, their weapons trained on the intruders. James and his team reacted instantly, diving for cover and returning fire. The battle was fierce, the sound of gunfire and explosions echoing through the halls. James felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he fought, his movements fluid and precise. He had trained for this moment, and he was ready to face whatever the Kralath threw at him. But even with their immunity, the humans were not invincible. Jameson took a hit to the shoulder, his armor shattering under the impact. Kara was forced to drag him to safety, her face tight with worry. "We have to keep moving," James shouted over the din of battle. "We can't let them box us in." Xyloth nodded, his eyes scanning the corridor ahead. The Central Lab should be just through those doors. If the weapon is anywhere, it'll be there. James gritted his teeth and pushed forward, his team close behind. They burst through the doors only to find themselves face to face with a sight that made their blood run cold. The lab was a hive of activity, with Kralath scientists and technicians working frantically at dozens of stations, and at the center of it all, glowing with an eerie red light, was the weapon. But it was not just one weapon. There were hundreds of them, each one a perfect replica of the device that had nearly wiped out James and his team on Zorin Prime. "They're mass-producing them," Xyloth said, his voice tinged with horror. "With this many weapons, they could wipe out entire planets." James felt a surge of anger and determination. "Not if we stop them first." He raised his weapon and fired, taking out the nearest Kralath guard. His team followed suit, and soon the lab was a chaos of flickering lights and flying debris. But the Kralath were not going down easily. They swarmed the team from all sides, their weapons spitting deadly energy beams. James felt a searing pain in his side as a beam grazed him, burning through his armor and flesh. He gritted his teeth and kept fighting, his regenerative abilities already kicking in to heal the wound. But he knew that even with their immunity, they couldn't keep this up forever. And then, just as they were starting to make headway, a new threat emerged. A massive Kralath clad in heavy armor and wielding a modified version of the weapon stepped out from the shadows. "You may have survived the first weapon," the Kralath general growled, his voice dripping with menace. "But this one will strip you of your precious immunity. You will die like the pathetic creatures you are." James felt a chill run down his spine. If the Kralath had found a way to nullify their regenerative abilities, then they were all in serious trouble. But he couldn't let fear control him. He had to act, and act fast. "Xyloth, Kara, Jameson," he shouted. "Focus on the other weapons. Destroy as many as you can. I'll handle the general." His team hesitated for a moment, their faces etched with concern. But then Xyloth nodded, a fierce light in his eyes. "Give him hell, James." James turned to face the general, his grip tightening on his weapon. "You want me?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Come and get me." The Kralath general roared and charged, his modified weapon glowing with a sickly green light. James dodged and weaved, trying to stay out of the weapon's range. He could feel the heat of the weapon's beam as it passed inches from his face, the air crackling with energy. He knew that one direct hit would be enough to end him, immunity or no. But James was not going to go down without a fight. He launched himself at the general, his fists and feet a blur of motion. The two of them grappled, rolling across the floor in a tangle of limbs and armor. The general was strong, his muscles rippling with power. But James was faster, his reflexes honed by years of training. He slipped out of the general's grasp and delivered a crushing blow to the Kralath's jaw, sending him staggering back. The general growled and raised his weapon, but James was already moving. He grabbed the barrel of the weapon and wrenched it upward, just as the general fired. The beam shot harmlessly into the air, missing James by inches. With a final, desperate effort, James twisted the weapon out of the general's grip and brought it down on the Kralath's head with a sickening crunch. The general slumped to the floor, his eyes glazing over in death. James stood over the fallen Kralath, his chest heaving with exertion. He looked around the lab, taking in the sight of his team finishing off the last of the weapons. "Is that all of them?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Xyloth nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Every last one. The Kralath won't be mass-producing these any time soon." James felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. They had stopped the Kralath and destroyed the weapons. But the fight was not over yet. They still had to get out of the facility and report back to the Galactic Council. As they made their way back through the corridors, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Kralath had shown that they were willing to go to any lengths to gain an advantage over the other races of the galaxy, and with the humans' immunity now known to all, they would be a target for every power-hungry despot and warlord out there. But for now at least, they had won. And as they emerged from the facility, battered and bruised but alive, James felt a sense of pride and determination. They had proven that humans and aliens could work together to face any threat, no matter how great. And he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The journey back to the Galactic Council was a blur of medical exams and debriefings. James and his team had sustained serious injuries during the mission, and the Council's doctors insisted on a full evaluation before they could even think about returning to duty. But even as he lay in the medical bay, his body aching from the fight, James couldn't stop thinking about what they had discovered in the Kralath facility. The idea that the Kralath had been mass-producing weapons specifically designed to target the humans was chilling. It showed just how far they were willing to go to gain an advantage. When he was finally cleared to leave the medical bay, James was summoned to appear before the full council. He walked into the chamber, his head held high, flanked by his team and Ambassador Xyloth. The council members were already seated, their faces grave as they watched James approach. He could feel the weight of their gazes on him, the tension in the room palpable. But then, to his surprise, the Ethian moderator stood up and began to clap. One by one, the other council members joined in, until the entire chamber was filled with the sound of applause. Captain James Maxwell, the moderator said, his voice ringing out over the din. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we wish to express our deepest gratitude for your bravery and sacrifice. Your actions have saved countless lives and prevented a catastrophic war. James felt a lump form in his throat. He had never sought recognition for his actions, but to hear the Council's praise was humbling. But we also recognize that this is not the end of the threat, the moderator continued. The Krelath have shown their true colors, and we must be vigilant in our efforts to maintain peace and stability in the galaxy. The moderator turned to face the other council members. In light of these events, I propose that we grant humanity a greater role in galactic affairs. They have proven themselves to be valuable allies and partners in the fight against tyranny and oppression. There were murmurs of agreement from the council members, and James felt a surge of pride. He had always known that humans had the potential to be a force for good in the galaxy, and now it seemed that the rest of the council was starting to see it too. We also pledged to support further research into the humans' unique abilities, the moderator said. With the right resources and support, we may be able to unlock the secrets of their immunity and use it for the betterment of all races. James nodded, his mind already racing with the possibilities. If they could find a way to harness the power of the human genome, they could revolutionize medicine and science across the galaxy. As the council session came to a close, James found himself surrounded by well-wishers and admirers. Aliens of all shapes and sizes came up to shake his hand and offer their congratulations. But through it all, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Krelath had been defeated, but there would always be others who sought to upset the balance of power in the galaxy. And as he looked out at the sea of faces, both human and alien, he knew that he would be ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He had a team of brave and dedicated individuals by his side and the support of the entire galactic community. Together, they could achieve anything, and James knew that he would stop at nothing to protect the peace and prosperity of the galaxy, no matter the cost. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.